Hey, future bestsellers, Lisa Daly here. I'm the best-selling traditionally published author of 8 books, and today we are talking 3-act structure, why you need to know it if you are planning to write a novel, and why English teachers make it so complicated. Hey everybody, thanks so much for tuning in today. If you are new here, be sure to like, subscribe, and ding that little bell so that you will be notified every time I post new writing videos. I am going to give you the advice that you need to write that book. Finally, write that book. So everything you need to know, just ding the little bell, right? You can do that. Okay, so today we're talking about the 3-act structure. Did you ever wonder why English teachers make the 3-act structure so complicated? Well, if you are planning on writing a novel, you are definitely going to need to know it, but it doesn't have to be that difficult. I think a lot of people feel like they don't really know what the 3-act structure is until until the book is already written. Like they can apply it after the fact, but when you're thinking about your own book and how that might fall into a 3-act structure, it can seem really frustrating and complicated. But lucky for you, I'm going to tell you all about it. So the simplest way to understand the 3-act story structure is this. Put your characters in a tree, set the tree on fire, get your characters out of the tree. That's all there is. Put your characters in a tree, set the tree on fire, get your characters out of the tree. And this applies to more than just stories where the main character is in some sort of mortal danger. They always have some situation that they cannot extricate themselves from. They can only go forward. They can't go back to the way their life was before. And you have to progress them in the story. Basically, what that means is that in Act 1, you put your characters in the tree. This means that you put them in a scenario where they're not going to be able to just go back to living their everyday lives. Let's talk plot. So if you think about the movie Speed, oh, this is a good example actually. If you think about the movie Speed, it just popped into my head. That is basically the same, put your characters on a bus, put a bomb on the bus, get your characters off the bus. But if you think about when Sandra Bullock gets on the bus, there's nothing she can do. Like once she steps on the bus, she has to deal with the situation of the bomb on the bus. There's no going back for her. The same thing is true if you're putting your characters in a tree, whether that's a literal tree or a metaphorical tree. They're in a situation where they can only go forward. Think about Luke Skywalker in Star Wars, which is actually a pretty good example of a very classic 3-act structure. You have Luke who gets this message from Princess Leia, and at a point pretty early in the story, his home doesn't exist anymore. He can only go forward. And so even though he's initially reluctant to help rescue Leia, at some point, he cannot go back to his old life. And going forward is really his only option. Act 2 is where we set the tree on fire. The thing you should know about Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3 is that they're not evenly distributed. Your story is not going to be a third, a third, a third. Act 1 and Act 3 are typically shorter. The middle of the book, where all of the meat, all the action happens, is going to be your largest section. And I can't give you an exact sort of percentage. I would say generally it's 25, 50, 25. Here I said I can't give you an exact percentage, and then I just did. It's not true for every story, but generally speaking, you get pretty quick into the scenario in the first act. The second act is a little longer while your character is trying to achieve their story goals. And then the third act is where the character solves the problem and gets their resolution or happily ever after. So once again, going back to Speed in the second act is basically where the bomb is on the bus and we know that all these characters are in peril. In Act 2 of Speed, there's not just a bomb on the bus. This is where the characters get more and more and more fuel added to the fire to make achieving their story goal more and more difficult, practically impossible. We just keep adding fuel to the fire. First, the bus can't go below 50 miles an hour or it will explode. Next, there's LA traffic to deal with, which is notoriously terrible and difficult to drive in, especially if you have to go over 50 miles an hour. The passengers are starting to panic, and that puts everybody else in danger. The bomb is hard to reach. It's hard for Keanu Reeves' character to see, and so it's very difficult to even think of disarming it because he basically has to go under the bus while it's moving. The bad guy has a camera on board so he can see everything that they do. And so anytime they think about maybe solving the problem, they are stymied by the fact that they're being watched constantly. Finally, they find an open freeway, which is under construction, where they can drive and not be impeded by traffic, so at least they can make it at 50 miles an hour, but surprise, the freeway hasn't been completely finished yet, and now they're going to have to pull an Evel Knievel to jump the bus over the part of the freeway that has not yet been constructed. So that's a lot of fires. And I'm using movies because it's generally easier to give those types of examples. But most stories are structured this way. Act 3 is where we get the characters out of the tree. They resolve their story goal, whatever it is that they're trying to accomplish or need to accomplish in order to sort of put the world right again. In the case of a story like Speed, the movie, we get all of the characters off the bus. Dennis Hopper has kind of his one last stand, but ultimately their storylines are resolved. Everybody's off the bus, everybody's relatively safe, and a couple people are going to get a happily ever after, and that one guy who was the tourist, he got a hell of a trip. So there's that. He's got some stories to tell when he gets back to Cleveland. That's all I'm saying. So when you learn in school this 3-act story structure, a lot of times it's sort of mucked up and made more complicated. And certainly there are lots of other elements that are important. And sure, if you want to, go back and look at that, it probably will make more sense to you now that you're actually a writer than it did when you were just a reader. That said, it doesn't need to be as difficult as we make it. In a nutshell, the 3-act story is put your characters in a tree, set the tree on fire, get your characters out of the tree. That's it. That's it. So this is important for you for a couple of reasons. The first thing is you should know what the basic 3 beats of your story are going to be before you start writing. Not having an end story goal is one of the reasons why books end up with what we call a soggy middle, which is basically that the plot is sort of meandering along for a while. And the reason for that is that there's no final destination. You don't know what's going to happen. And so even if you are a pantser and not a plotter, if you can just get those 3 points, what puts your characters in the tree, what sets the tree on fire, how do your characters get out of the tree, and you can figure out everything else as you go along, that's still okay. But those 3 points are what you need to know before you ever get started writing your novel. Otherwise, like that. You don't want that. Nobody wants to read that. No, bad. So here are some other examples of movies and books that have a classic 3-act structure. And I hope by seeing these examples, you will get a better idea of what I'm talking about. That said, if I have not been clear enough, definitely let me know in the comments below, and I'll either do a future video if there are a lot of questions, or if you just have small questions now, I'll just go ahead and answer them for you in the comments. Let's break down some stories. Act 1. In the Da Vinci Code, a guy is murdered at the Louvre, and only Professor Langdon can decode the symbols and figure out who did it. We've just put Professor Langdon in a tree. Act 2, Langdon is blamed for the murder. He's being chased by the cops and a homicidal monk, and he's betrayed by one of his oldest friends. Set the tree on fire. Act 3, Professor Langdon solves the mystery and proves his innocence. Get your characters out of the tree. Act 1, Luke sees the message from Princess Leia in R2-D2 and decides to help Obi-Wan Kenobi rescue the princess. Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're my only hope. Put your characters in a tree.
Dude, I need a favor.
Act 2, Luke finds Leia, but he loses Obi-Wan Kenobi, who's sort of become a surrogate father to him. And now his home is gone, and he feels like his only choice is to help the rebels. I mean, what else is he going to do? Set the tree on fire. Act 3, Luke saves the rebellion and explodes the Death Star. Get your character out of the tree. How about Legally Blonde? Act 1, girl loses boy because he says she's not serious. He needs a Jackie and she's a Marilyn. And she decides to go to law school to win him back. Put your characters in a tree. In this case, Harvard. Act 2, she shows up only to find out Warner's engaged to her brand new enemy. She's struggling in school and nobody takes her seriously. Not just Warner, nobody. Her plan is not working. Set the tree on fire. Act 3, after a particularly humiliating event, she realizes that she can be herself and still be serious. Girl discovers she doesn't really need boy after all, which we should all know that in the first act, but sometimes it does take us a little longer. Yeah. And that she's now too serious for Warner. Get your character out of the tree. Speed. Act 1, Sandra Bullock loses her license and Keanu sees the bus explode, which puts our characters on a bus. Act 2, Dennis Hopper puts a bomb on the bus. Uh-oh. Act 3, get your characters safely off the bus. Even that one guy from Ferris Bueller who annoyed the crap out of everybody the entire time. Harry Potter. Act 1, Harry receives an invitation to Hogwarts and discovers he's a warlock, and not only that, he's basically the only survivor of Voldemort's murder spree. Put your character in a tree. Act 2, Harry discovers Voldemort is seeking the Philosopher's Stone, and Hagrid has accidentally spilled the beans on how to get it. He must act, or life as he knows it is over. Set the tree on fire. Act 3, Harry kills Quirrell, foils Voldemort's plans, and saves the day. Get your characters out of the tree. As always, thank you so much for watching. I hope this video was helpful to you and you are ready to get started writing your book. I myself am working on a brand new book, and so as I do these things myself, I want to be thinking about you guys and what you need to write your first book. So, or your second or your third, whatever you need. So as I'm going through the writing process on my current work in progress, I will be sharing these videos with you so that you have some idea what you're doing as well. Follow along. Let's all play together. As always, thanks so much for tuning in. Now, I'm going to be giving a ton of writing advice over the next, well, forever, really. As long as you guys are here, I will be here too. So please be sure to hit like, subscribe, and ding that little bell so that you are notified every time I post a new writing video, which will be on Monday and Wednesday. All right, I got a word count to take care of. That's the stupid thing. I sound like a cowboy. What am I doing? That's what happens if you don't know the 3-act structure, right? You are writing your writing your story. I know I always type like this. I don't type like this in real life. I don't type like this in real life. I'm like a monster or an author with really arthritic fingers. If you have not figured out your basic 3-act structure, when you start your book, it is very likely that you will either meander around and really have a book that requires a lot of patience to read and no interest from agents and editors, or you will have a crap ton of rewrites. And honestly, rewrites suck most of the time. And so if you can avoid that, I would like to help you do that, right? If possible, I would like to help you avoid that special kind of hell that is rewriting. All right, well, thanks for tuning in. If you have any questions, be sure to hit me up in the comments below. I'll be here every Monday and Wednesday. As always, thank you so much for watching and being part of our fun little community here. If you have ideas that you want me to cover for a future video, or there's something that I missed today, which is always possible because you know me, please hit me up below. As you probably know, one of my favorite things in the whole world is to help new writers. So I want to make sure when it comes to your book that you get your own happily ever after. See you next time.